In this lesson, I want to go over the effects page. Now you see all of your effects on the left-hand side, and you have this rack looking device or section on the right-hand side. And what you do is you just turn them on by clicking on these little buttons, and then you can rearrange them. And the signal flow is that it goes from your oscillator section. I've got this oscillator A, and it goes into this top one, this top effect. And then after this effect, it goes into the second and third. So it's top down is the signal flow. And this is important if you, when you're adding effects, because this will affect your sound. By default, when you turn on this hyper, there is the mix at 50% for the hyper, and the dimension is at 0. Now, the dimension is going to be like almost adding a space feeling to your sound. It's adding these delays, and these delays have like a motion effect, and some of them are out of time with each other and completely out of phase with each other. So this is not really a mono-compatible effect, but if you have it on in stereo, it can add a really nice widening effect to your sound. Let's just experiment with this, put out 50%. And I find this a cool way to add width in stereo. There is the size and the mix, and you can see on this mix, it's a bit gray. And that means that if I click on the mix, I can adjust the level. If I add in this effect, let's say I want to reduce the level because the effect is making it too loud, then I can lower this level like that. So all of the effects, if I click on all the effects, if you click on the mix knob, you can also adjust the level. If they are making your sound a bit too quiet or a bit too loud, you can adjust the level. That is what the dimension does. Now the hyper is similar to a chorus effect. Each of these voices of unison, it's almost like a pseudo voice of unison, like if I would add voices of unison on the actual oscillator, but it's using like delays and then detuning these delays and kind of putting them out of time with each other. And you have things like adjusting the rate, the detuning of these delays, and we can play around with them. Let's put this at 0, raise up this mix. There you just hear it's getting louder because there isn't anything going on with the rate and detuning. Let's increase this rate. There you hear the sound wobbling. Let's add in the detune. And that's where you get that unison effect, similar to if I had voices here and I had the detune all the way down. I wouldn't really get much of a change until I increase that detune. You can adjust these voices of unison all the way up to 7, and you can just play around with this. Let's go ahead and just add a lot more detuning. And now that almost sounds like I have a hypersaw on there. When you add these voices of unison, you're adding in more CPU usage. So this is actually a way that you can create that adding multiple voices of unison effect without that CPU usage. Now it's not like exact, an exact replication of adding these voices of unison. It's using like just delaying that signal a bit and doing some modulations to that signal. And you can hear it gets louder, so let's lower this level. So that's a way that you could add that like hypersaw effect without increasing your CPU. And I could also get like, let's say add 7 here, add 7 here. Now I've got kind of like 14 voices of unison. And that can get a really crazy, like swarming effect sound. Before I move on for the hyper, there is this retrigger, which if you turn it on, it almost functions like if I turn down this randomness knob. So it will create that like zapping sound that you get when this randomness is all the way down. Next, I'll add on the distortion. Now for the distortion, you have these drop downs, and you can also, on all of these effects, you could save the effect settings. And also if I go into this menu, I can lock the effect rack. I can load an effect chain, so I can make an effect chain and save it and then load it later. And to save it, I just go to save here. So on this distortion, it opens up the tube distortion. I have some other options, soft clip, hard clip, etc. And I can scroll through them. And then you've got this filter that is off by default, but you could add the filter on before it hits the distortion or after it hits the distortion, or pre, off, and you can get your low pass, band pass, or high pass, and that shifts if you adjust this control here. And then you can adjust the frequency, adjust that Q, like that. Next, you have your drive and your mix. And when you increase this drive, there's this visual representation of what your sound looks like or how it will appear. And I have a saw wave, and it's making it more square-like. And let's take off that filter. And if I play this in the oscilloscope, you can see that my saw wave is more rounded, more square-like. Now, if I go through these, we can look at the different options. We have the mix knob here, and let's go through the soft clip, hard clip, diode 1. Let's just put that at 100%. Diode 2. Linear fold. Pretty crazy distortion there. And then sine fold. Another pretty crazy one. And then we have the zero square. And if I increase this drive, it's essentially a square wave now. That's a very square wavy sound. Downsample, which downsamples the signal. Pretty familiar sound. Like a bit crusher, asymmetric, rectify. Now for the X shaper, there is an option to edit the A and edit the B. Now what this does, if I have this drive at 0, that's going to be my A. And if I increase this to 100%, that is going to be my B. So I can control what the shape I want it to be at 0% or 100%. So let's say I go into here, I click on this graph, and this is the same type of features as if I were to edit like an LFO, where I double click to add these nodes, double click to remove them. I can select them all, change them. Let's say I want this to be my A part. Now I click on this drive knob, and it changes to look like that graph that I created. And if I increase this up to 100%, I didn't edit my B yet, so you can see it just goes back to what it was before. Then I can edit my B. Let's say I just want to do this to my B and make it look like that. And X out of that. Let's go ahead and go to my knob. And now if I go and increase this drive, then that is going to be my B. So that's pretty cool about the X shaper. And then you have this X shaper asymmetric, which takes your A and B and then wave shapes them asymmetrically. And this allows you to bring out even order harmonics from the distortion. Then you have this sine shaper, stomp box, tape saturation, and those are all of the modes for the distortion. Next, there is a flanger effect. You can play with the rate, the depth, feedback. If you increase that feedback, it gets a bit more metallic sounding. And then the phase, and then you can also turn on this BPM if you want to adjust this rate and have it synced to your BPM. Or you can just turn that rate off. And then just play around with these other parameters like the depth and feedback. To get more of like a constant sound. Next, you have your phaser. You have the same thing with the BPM here in the rate, your depth, frequency, feedback, and also the phase. You've got your chorus, which is going to be pretty similar to that hyperdimension, but more of just like a traditional chorus. You've got the rate, the BPM, same thing as the flanger in the phaser. You have these two delays. Let's go and just put this mix at 100%. And by default, this LPF, this low pass filter is on. I usually have to end up adjusting this. You also have a high pass filter, so you could turn this on to a high pass filter just by clicking on it. I'll just leave it at that low pass and raise it up. So you have these two options for adding in these delays and also the depth. Like how intense that chorus is, and then this feedback. Which, as you increase it, gets very metallic-y sounding. Then you have a delay. You've got the feedback, which is pretty common. You've got the BPM. And if I click and drag up and down, then it adjusts these BPMs. If I want them to be linked, I can hit that link and it will link the BPMs. If I go down here at the moment, let's go ahead and make this a bit faster. You can hear it's a pretty mono sounding delay. If I want to offset the left or right side to get a bit more of a stereo delay effect, then I can just click and drag here at the bottom. And now my delay is more stereo. And if I want to reset it, I just right click, reset that control. If I drag up all the way, I can see now it says triplet. Let's link that, drag it up, we'll get a triplet. If I drag it up further, I'll get a dotted eighth note. And if I want to reset that, then I just right click and reset. Next, there is a filter. So you just play around with this, drag this little dot up and down. You can get a filter off that low end, filter off that high end. And then just to take it off, I just drag that all the way up to the right there. Then you have your normal and your ping pong. And with the ping pong, you hear it now ping ponging back and forth from that left and right side. And with the ping pong, usually you have it just set at like 1/4 on both sides, and then it'll ping pong back and forth. But I could actually change one of these, like the right side. Maybe I'll do 1/4 and 1/8. And I can get a bit of a different effect with that ping pong delay. Now this tap delay is a bit interesting. These are no longer going to be left and right. They're both going to be center delays, but this left one is going to delay once. And then after this delays once at a half, then this right side will be triggered and it will delay at a 1/4 according to this feedback. So if I play one note, you can hear that that waited a half of a note and then started delaying at a quarter note after that first half note hit. So that's pretty interesting type of delay there. Sometimes I'll use this delay for like Haas effect. I'll turn off this BPM and you can get just the milliseconds. Let's put this at normal. And I'll put this like at 1 and then this at maybe 10. And you can mix that in and get like a Haas effect. So more of another way to add width is using this delay. After the delay is going to be the compressor. Now with the compressor, you have a lot of your threshold, ratio, attack, release, gain, everything you would expect from a compressor. And then you have the multiband option, and this really flattens out the sound. We're adding some upward compression and just really flattening out the dynamics. So this is very useful for making like lead sounds, like really front and center lead sounds where you just want to flatten out all the frequencies. And what this does is, because we hear higher frequencies louder, even if they are a lower level, this tends to brighten up the sound a lot. So this can add a lot of brightness for the sound, because it's just flattening out the frequencies and increasing the high-end frequencies a lot. What you could also do for the compressor is put this before, and I like to arrange these. Let's say I got the compressor and just use it to gain increase your sound into the distortion if you want to get some more drive out of this distortion. So there you hear the volume isn't really increasing, just this gain, because I have that behind this distortion. It's driving it into the distortion and just adding a lot more drive. So if your distortion is not getting your sound where you need to go, then put a compressor before it and pump up this gain, and then you can get some extra drive out of your distortion. Next, you have the reverb. Now, the reverb on Serum has its limitations. It's not the best reverb, but it works. It's okay. You've got the plate reverb, and these knobs change depending on your setting. You've got the size, pre-delay, low cut, high cut, dampening, width. So it usually defaults to something relatively mono sounding. And it's very metallic sounding. And this hall is a bit more smoother, and then these change. I wish that, however, so like I had this width all the way up. When I change, this spin depth just stays there. So I gotta like fix this because I don't want this spin modulation. I usually end up taking that down, and I just wish the knobs would adjust if I change the settings. Like if I made the adjustment on this plate and then I adjust it to the hall, it would adjust to whatever the settings were on the hall when I were adjusting them, or like save the settings. It's see, they're not, the knobs aren't changing. So that's kind of like a weird thing that this does, and just something to keep in mind. And you've got the mix and level here as well. And so that is the reverb. Then you've got the EQ, you've got your low cut, your kind of like bell peak type of curve, and also your shelf. It says, when I click on this, it says low pass filter, LPF, but that's actually a high pass filter because it's letting the high pass come in. So that's interesting, because this also says low pass, but these are your low pass and high pass, your shelf, and these are the, let's see what peak or bell type of filters. So pretty decent EQ options, pretty basic though. You might, when you're making a sound, you might need to add on additional EQ to really get your sound where it is. But with all of these effects, I feel like that you can get really close to a sound that you want to achieve just using these effects. And then if you want to get your sound better in the mix, you can take like if I'm just putting on a reverb as I'm creating and producing a track, and then I want to get a better reverb, I could put on like a Valhalla Vintage Verb type of reverb and take this off as I'm mixing down my track. And then you have the filter. This, I've talked about the filter before, is going to have all of the same settings as the filter in this oscillator section. So you have all the same filter types in this drop-down menu, and your mix and level, cutoff, resonance, drive, fat, pan for this MG low, and then that changes depending on the type of filter. I believe this, yeah, so this is the variable knob, which changes. It's not always the fat. So that is everything that I want to go over for the effects section. I will see you in the next lesson.